Oops. Oh my.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We are just going to wait a few minutes and give people a chance to join, and then we will get started. All right, welcome everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. Before we go into the presentations and the Q&A for tonight, just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about Zoom. I'm assuming most of you are pretty familiar with Zoom and how it works, but for those of you who aren't, just a couple of features that we'll be using tonight. When we get to the Q&A section, we are going to use the Q&A button on the bottom of the screen. So if you click on that, you'll be able to write in your questions. Feel free to write those in at any time. And then when we get to the Q&A, we will just try to get to as many of those as we possibly can. There is also a chat feature at the bottom of the screen. So if you click on that, you can make comments and chat with each other. Feel free to do that. You can send chats to, I think, everybody as well as to the panelists. But we're going to ask you if you have questions to try to put those in the Q&A just because we're afraid we might lose them in the chat. We'll try to monitor that as much as we can, but just to make sure that we get to all of your questions, try to put those in the Q&A. And if you have any technical difficulties, if you're not hearing somebody or the screen isn't showing up right, feel free to write that either in the chat or the Q&A, and we will try to get that as quickly as we possibly can. So with that, again, thank you for joining us, and I am going to turn it over to Susan to do the welcome and get us going.
Thank you. And thanks to everyone for joining us on this beautiful evening. I want to start by just acknowledging that we are all living on the land and in the waters of the Salish Sea that were, home to the Coast Salish tribes and is their territory, that they were here long before us. And we just acknowledge and honor their generations of knowledge about this area, and the love and care that they have for our natural resources. And before that, it was home to the Orcas and the different pods who've lived here long before us. And before the Orcas, of course, were the salmon. So we just want to think when we're out on the water or just even looking at it or on the land surrounding the Salish Sea, to always think of that and be aware and respectful of those who live in the oceans, and that we're visiting them in their home, and they've been here a lot longer than us. I know there's some kind of a crazy time in our worlds right now, so I wanted to start, let's see, yes, I'm going to show a short video. Actually, it was taken a number of years ago from Bush Point, and it's one of those cases where actually, I'm gonna get rid of this, where watching from shore was better than trying to be out on a boat watching them. But I'll share this. Well, I want to just talk about a few things for us to reflect on. And just to take a moment to reflect on what our country's been through in these months. And sending some love and hope to them. I think that the numbers of people who died and the numbers of family members, and also about the thousands lost to the wildfires that are happening. Firefighters are to save our homes from fire. So we want to continue on knowing that we all have these burdens, and as well as the loss that our we don't want to add to that clarity that's part of our daily lives, and we really want to this webinar be held in learning and listening. And we ask that people carry on that respect and behavior, especially posting on social media. It's really easy to get angry and upset on social media. And we know there's many differences of opinion about the complex issues threatening our southern resident orcas. And we know we don't all agree on everything. But we do believe each of us wants to help and do our part to save the southern residents and other whales. And that's why we're all so passionate. We just don't want to let that passion get in the way of respectful dialogue. And that's the only way we can really help the southern residents. So we're really happy to have you be part of this. There. And we'll stop my screen share, just try to keep things in perspective. And our whole reason of launching our Share the Water webinar series and kind of reactivating our Facebook page is to educate and realize we live in urban waterways. So there's lots of boaters out there. And there's more and more whales out there too. So we want to find ways that we can minimize our impact on the whales that we share the waters with. So now I have the pleasure to introduce Elisa Lemire Brooks, our Whale Sighting Network coordinator, who has been very busy keeping track of wonderfully J and K pods the last 2 days. Had a busy summer with all kinds of transients around. So her head's spinning a bit from all the whale activity. But she'll give us a quick update and talk a little bit more about Share the Water and Be Whale Wise. Thank you, Elisa.
Unmute. Let's see. Okay, yeah, thanks for that. And it's always lovely to see that LPOD pass. Share the Water. Susan and Howie started Share the Water back in 2012 and actually started a Facebook page with the hopes that we would all have a place to go to learn about safe boating and the whales and share stories and share dialogue about Be Whale Wise and best practices around the whales. Wasn't very active, but recently we've re-engaged that and are, especially after this summer with the transients and spending so much time in the spring and summer actually around Puget Sound. And so actually last year we got a grant to launch our, what's the name of it? Whale Safe Vessel Project. And then COVID hit. So we stalled out there and had to stop getting some of the materials out to the marinas and ports around Puget Sound. And then also we were planning on doing some in-person evenings on this subject. And so, but with COVID, that came to a halt, and then we resumed and are putting together these webinars, and still have Share the Water Facebook page as a place for people to share their thoughts and other things about watercraft safety around the whales of the Salish Sea. So that's a little bit about that. And then a quick update about who's currently been around in Puget Sound. So J-Pod, we all know the last couple of days has been in here, and that's been wonderful. Primarily in the North Sound. They went down to the central Puget Sound yesterday and overnight. Who knows where they were, but came back north today and are currently in the northern end of Admiralty Inlet. So we'll see if they continue west or if they hang around and come back in. I heard from someone out fishing today. They are coho are running, so maybe I'm guessing that's what they're after. But we also have 3 2020 newbie gray whales that are still here. That came in the spring, and 2261 primarily hangs out up in the Oak Harbor area, and 2259 and 2262 spend a lot of time together in the Snohomish Delta between Hat Island and Everett and Tulalip area there. And they're all still here. So it's, then they're both in very high traffic areas. So we're really hoping to get word out to people in those areas to be mindful of the large baleen whales that, can surface anywhere at any time, go on deep dives and come up far from where they went under. And then also we had a humpback come in yesterday that traveled down, first seen off Point No Point, and then throughout the day made its way south. And then we got a report this morning of 2 humpbacks in Commencement Bay, heading more towards along the waterfront, and we'll see. So we've got baleen whales in, and we've got the endangered southern residents coming and going, and they'll be making more trips inland here in the months ahead. So with that, I hand it over to Howard, who's going to talk about our southern residents. And then after that, we'll turn it over to Alan Myers and Taylor Kimball of Department of Fish and Wildlife for short talk and questions.
You're muted. Howard.
There we
There we
go.
go. All right.
Okay,
Are we on?
okay. Now I need to get your PowerPoint up.
Yeah. Okay. I want to start with the events of September 5th because it was an amazing day. It was the stuff of legend, really, and kind of mysterious in some ways. It started out kind of midday, reports of Southern residents heading east past Race Rocks coming in. The Center for Whale Research launched 3 boats, 2 out of Snug Harbor on San Juan and 1 out of Victoria, to try to cover this because it looked like there could be a superpod, because J-pod had also been seen further east, roughly north of Dungeness Spit. So they were sort of approaching each other. And in the case of the L's and K's, in a hurry. According to Mark Mallison, the Center for Whale Research researcher, for a full minute, some L's and K's anyway, were doing about 15 knots steadily eastward toward the J's. So there was some kind of excitement, some serious attraction going on. And it was there. J35's new baby that was discovered by a whale watch naturalist, and immediately the Center for Whale Research came in and documented the new baby. And everyone was excited, including all the scientists and the observers and the whales, apparently, because it was a very rambunctious day, a lot of activity, a lot of vocalizations, a lot of surface active behavior. And basically all 3 pods were very much into it that day. And it was the first super pod, as we call it, when they come together, all 3 pods, in a very long time, in a couple of years. So it was great to see. And until that day, J-pod had been in Georgia Strait for probably about 5 days, and K's and L's were out in the Pacific or out past the entrance to Juan de Fuca, out on maybe Swiftsure Bank or somewhere out there, not really known. So they could have been like 100 miles away and separated by Vancouver Island. So out of acoustic range by our instruments anyway, anything that we know of to be able to tell if there was any kind of communication going on. And the little baby had a dorsal fin that was not flopped over. So that indicated that it probably was, had been born 12 to 24 hours or so before that. So it could have been in the middle of the night, whether it was born in that location or born in Georgia Strait and brought down, we don't know. But for the rest of the day, the K's, L's, and met up with J-pod, and all 3 pods mixed and mingled, played and socialized, breached and spy hopped and rolled around each other. And no doubt there was some hanky-panky going on, some mating probably, spread out over many miles of water. And they weren't foraging for food. This wasn't a grocery store trip. This was to party. This was in some way to get together and have this superpod. And it was on the occasion, coincidence or not, of the new baby, J35's new baby, J57. So if that's really the case, how did they know? How did K's and L's know that J-pod had just had her new baby? It's possible they were able, if the baby was born that morning or the night before, they could have maybe communicated out the Strait of Juan de Fuca, but again, that would be, what, 50 miles or so, we don't know, but a long way out to wherever they were. And the next day they were gone. They had had their party, they partied into the night, and then they drifted out west and were documented in the subsequent days and completely on September 10th by Mark Mallison again. And all members were present. The new baby was there, and it was a complete documentation of the population on that day, as well as on the 5th, and all the photos together added up to the entire community. And then on September 25th, let me get this better. Oh yeah, on September 23rd, I'm sorry, Sarah Haisong Shimazu was lucky enough to get a photo of little J57 and be able to see the belly markings and be able to determine that this is a boy. It was a male offspring, and that's, you know, that's always good news, a new baby, but a new male is not necessarily such a good news because there's been way too many males born. Of course, boys don't have babies. And so from a population standpoint, in terms of rebuilding the population of southern residents, a boy doesn't really help much. And there's the births over the past over 20 years have been skewed horribly. I mean, well, impressively, I should say, toward males. Since 1998, there have been 28 males born and only 15 females. So it's almost a 2-to-1 ratio of males to females. So that's a lot of mouths to feed and no babies to emerge from 28 out of those. So then on September 25th, J41 Eclipse had a calf. And in that case, the dorsal fin was flopped over, and some whale watch naturalists saw that birth apparently, or they saw the J41 just before and then just after. And before there was no calf, and then there was a calf. So, and the dorsal fin was completely flopped over, indicating that that baby had just been born. And I want to mention that it's after an 18-month gestation, twice what is the human gestation. They're born very well developed, very precocious. They're very alert. They've been actually listening to the ocean and to the communications of their family for probably half that time after their auditory abilities had developed. So they've been listening to their family chatter, 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 you know, for months and months. And so they came out very familiar with how their family sounds. So what happened 18 months ago that we now have 2 new babies from? Well, we don't have any record of a superpod, but on February 27th, 2019, L41, the male, Mega, was photographed by Amy Eberling from the shore of Washington Park in Rosario Strait. He was with some other L-pod whales at that time, but he was in the neighborhood. So we don't know if, you know, they met up with some jays and there was some mating going on, but the timing would be right for L41 to be the father, and he is known by genetic studies to be the father of 21 other known offspring. So now we have a total of 74 in the southern resident community. And of course, we always consider the L-pod whale Tokitai, who is in Miami, still confined in a display tank. So she really is an L-pod whale, but she's not in the population. So we count it as 74, J-pod with 24 members, K-pod has 17, and L-pod has 33. But there's about a 70% miscarriage rate. That's been determined by fecal studies and other ways of determining when a whale is pregnant, and yet there is no calf that emerges. So that's a pretty horrible miscarriage rate, and roughly about 40% die in their first year, even, you know, after they survive the entire gestation and are born. So that's a really horrible attrition rate of fetuses and newborns. And all the evidence points to a lack of salmon, a lack of nutrition, nutritional deprivation, that they're just not getting the calories they need, and especially the mothers during the gestation and in their first year or so when they're nursing. The mothers need huge amounts of food, basically good, healthy food. There's no better food than Chinook salmon. Their dietary preference has been right on in terms of what is the best food for them for energy and for being able to bring forth new young. but those Chinook salmon are so scarce that at least in previous years, they've had a really bad time having babies, basically, and that has caused this drastic decline in their population. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that removing the lower Snake River dams would provide habitat, spawning habitat, access to 5,500 miles of spawning habitat in the Idaho wilderness, near pristine habitat that currently the salmon just can't mainly get down. They can't get up either, up into those far reaches, but it's mainly the little smolts that are just not able to survive all those dams and the warm water and the still water of the reservoirs and all the assorted hazards that come with the dams. Simple dam removal, and there actually is no rational economic reason when you get down to the facts why that can't be done. That would be the single most effective action to help struggling orcas right now. Now I want to talk about another interesting moment that happened on September 26th when there were about 20 plus transient orcas in Strait of Juan de Fuca between Race Rocks and Trial Island, north of Port Angeles or so. And that's a lot in one place. We see that more and more, but it was the T123s, the 46s, the 46Bs, the 46B1s, the 60s, and the 69s. That's a lot of matrilines. And at the same time, the residents were further west. They had been coming in, but they stalled out. They kind of waited the other side of Race Rocks. And, you have to wonder, what's the dynamic? What's the sort of mutual awareness? And were the residents holding back because ordinarily the transients will step aside more or less. They'll avoid any kind of an encounter. But it could have been fairly evenly balanced in terms of numbers, or even more transients than residents. So it's possible that the residents decided that discretion was the better part of valor, and they would just wait around a while until the transients went away, basically. So then on Sunday, September 27th, K-Pod was in Harrow Strait, and J-Pod came down Admiralty, as Elisa has mentioned. And I'll just finish up with the events of today, because we had seen them all the way down probably 7 or 8 miles south, somewhere between Point No Point and Double Bluff. We could just see blows off in the distance, and they often kind of hover and forage around there, and then flip back south or go up into Saratoga Passage. But later this afternoon, we started to see and get reports that they were coming our way, coming north up Admiralty Inlet. We're on the west side of Whidbey Island looking over at the Olympics with Admiralty Inlet in between. So this was our opportunity. And sure enough, we got out on the bluff, and it's from 200 feet up and about 2 miles or so out to where they were. But it was another glorious moment of seeing this wonder of our resident orcas go by and looking good. They were frolicking, a lot of breaches. It was sort of steady travel at this point. They don't usually forage right here, but they were looking good. And in fact, all the reports that we've had is that they're not seeing any skinny whales, no emaciated, distressed looking whales among them. I should also add the note that yes, we've had 2 births, and there are predictions of 2 others that might give birth before too long. But before this time, before this month, it was January of 2019 that there were any calves. And before that, and there were 2 that time, and they are still alive. But before that, it was about 3 years before. So we're talking about 4 calves in 4 years. And that really isn't enough to rebuild the population. So they're still very much in trouble, even if they look good at the moment. I'm all done.
Okay, thank you, Howard. And I just want to mention also that the J-Pod was right on time coming into Puget Sound. The southern residents tend to come down into Puget Sound for their late fall, early winter forays, usually starting right around October 1st, and will be seen into January, sometimes February. So as Howie said, with 2 new calves and a couple more pregnant females, we really are asking all boaters to give them a lot of extra space this year. Yes, follow the regulations, but even go above and beyond that, and really watch them from a distance so that these little babies can have a good chance to make it. So we are really pleased tonight to have Captain Alan Myers and Officer Taylor Kimball from the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. I'm sure their lives are busy this time of year, as they are always. But now as we have the orcas coming into the more populated waters and still some nice fall weather, we're happy to have them out there to help enforce the regulations that are out there and to help educate people like we're doing tonight. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. I appreciate that. I'll just start off giving a little bit of introduction to myself and then talk to you a little bit about what we're hoping to spread the message about and keep spreading the message on. And I'll let Officer Kimball as well introduce himself here just as soon as I'm done. I'm Captain Alan Myers. I'm with the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife Police. And for the last 6 years, I've been in charge of the unit that is on the water, helping to protect and enforce the laws that pertain to southern resident killer whales, as well as every other natural resource law that exists on the books and public safety law that exists on the books. So with those, with that said, you can tell just right off the bat how large scale our mission is, our mission covers. And I have a group of highly dedicated and extremely professional, wonderful people that work in the North and Central Puget Sound, and those folks number about 13. So that's 13 officers in order to cover a vast, vast area of the Puget Sound, and are charged with a plethora of tasks that take their attention far outside of being able to focus on this incredibly important endangered species. But they are able to do that to the best of their ability and do it well, even as stretched as our resources are and as thin as our resources are, and what we're provided for funding and vessels, et cetera, and staffing, of course. So for the last 6 years, like I said, I've been tasked with being the guy in charge of handling operations and overseeing the operations portion of officers and vessels that help protect this endangered species. I've also been on several of the task force technical committees and advisory committees that worked to develop the new laws that we're going to talk about tonight that pertain to the Be Whale Wise structure and the different rules that are in place to help give these animals a little more space, a little more breathing room, and an ability to live their lives with a little more peace. At the same time, we're cognizant of the very important aspect that certain industries play in helping protect those important species, and that's our whale watching community, and the good work that they do as advisors of the resource and getting people's attention and helping with the funding that goes into ensuring that Fish and Wildlife and other organizations can continue to do our mission, which is protect these animals. So that's a little bit about me, and I'll turn it over to Officer Kimball here to say a little bit about himself.
Yeah, I'll keep it short and sweet. So I grew up in Washington. I grew up being up in the islands and doing that. So I was happy when I got the job, and eventually was able to transfer up into the Bellingham area. But my patrol district occupies the San Juan Islands and Island County and out into the Straits. But I've been up, I'm more of a boots on the ground, and I've been doing it up here since 2013. So I've seen the laws change, and I've been heavily involved with helping educate the public on being responsible around watching whales and doing that type of stuff.
Yeah, so one of the key things to know about Officer Kimball is he is our original dedicated whale position officer. His position is funded in part and almost in whole by the whale grant that we were able to receive from NOAA. And NOAA helps fund his position and helps us maintain those boots on the ground that Taylor's been able to maintain since 2013. And as that, Taylor has been our main outreach, one of our main outreach people, and a great educator coming from the law enforcement world and describing the complexity that goes into how do you protect this endangered species that is extremely well liked to the point where they suffer from some of the celebrity that they hold because people are so drawn to them and drawn to them at times where it's a detriment to this sensitive species. So Officer Kimball is our original that we got from our whale grant application from NOAA. But you can see that with that position, we had to go outside of state resources, state agency, in order to fund that position. Now, as part of when the Washington State Legislature got involved and with the governor's initiative, we were able to secure funding for 3 additional positions that are whale-funded, whale-focused officers. Now, they're not whale-dedicated, meaning neither Taylor or any of the other positions that we've been able to fill have made it so 100% of their job is whales. It's just not possible. In fact, although it's a major focus of theirs, they're still drawn to every other facet of law enforcement that Department of Fish and Wildlife law enforcement officers have to deal with. And that's everything from, poaching of salmon to poaching of bears and everything in between, from the terrestrial side to the marine side. So these officers have to do an extreme variety of resource protection, but their main charge and funding comes from whale-focused funding sources. So we're very pleased to have Officer Kimball and the other 3 officer positions that we're able to fund. But they're a drop in the bucket to helping us solve this problem of this diminishing species. And it's one of those things that, I push in every format I can possibly push it, and every presentation that I give is that we're vastly behind the curve when it comes to what's needed to help this species pull out of its nosedive into extinction. And there are many groups that are all pitching in at this time with us to help us do that. But I can't stress enough that more help is needed. So let me now kind of switch over to the point that we wanted to make with some of the new laws in place. This year, the legislature passed several new laws that govern both commercial and recreational boaters that are on the water. And these are characterized in the graphic that you can hopefully see up on the screen here. The main crux of these new regulations involve spacing, giving distance and space to these animals, to southern resident killer whales in particular. And that starts off with a 7-knot speed limit within a half-mile distance of any individual southern resident killer whale or a pod of them. And that's where the bubble of protection starts. And then it narrows further to within that bubble, if you have a stay away limit where in the front or the back behind individual animal or a pod, you must stay at least 400 yards away. And from the sides, it's 300 yards. So those new rules, it kind of gives an oval shape of a protection bubble around them, are designed to give these animals space so that they can forage, they can feed, they can interact with each other, and not have to be incurred upon by engine noise or other distractions, visual or otherwise, that may keep them from being successful in their hunt or successful raising their young. So those rules that were put into place this year, I was able to go and testify on the importance of these new regulations myself and the legislature. So was Officer Kimball. We were both down there to testify and support these new regulations. They're a beginning of an understanding within the state and within our culture of what impacts these animals and what our responsibility is in order to stop those impacts and help this animal and pull it back from the brink, which is where it's at. And so we ask that everyone please adhere to these rules and regulations, not just because if you don't, there's steep penalties, both civil and criminal, that could be levied against individuals who stray too close, but also because you care, like most Washingtonians do, about these animals. You care about the resource in Washington State. You care about the cultural heritage that comes with these incredibly important animals. And we ask that you remember and hold on to that feeling of care for these animals as you look at the regulations that we have here up on the screen. And think about your own impacts to these animals, your own impacts as far as, where you go, like to fish and recreate, where you like to interact with different creatures within the Puget Sound. Think about your impacts, what you can do for them or against them. And it starts with sort of a introspective look at yourself in the mirror and then determining whether or not you can play an effective role in helping us ensure that these animals are around in the future. So I'm also working on a committee now currently, a working group currently that's putting in place and going to stand up as part of the legislation that was passed along with these laws here that will be governing the commercial whale watch industry. And we're working tirelessly to make sure that those rules are in place that help ensure that balance, that important balance with the improvement to the environment with these whales, as well as maintaining an industry that we value and think that is an important feature of Washington State and something that is highly prized. So it's a tough balance, and as all issues are when it comes to determining what we value in nature, but it's one in which we're striving to try to hit the right note with. So I've droned on and on and on, but I'll turn it over to anyone else. Taylor, if you have anything to add or anyone has any questions for me, please feel free to send them my way.
No, that's I agree with everything you said. There's a lot going on and everyone's trying to do their best to make things work. I don't want to take up any more time. If we can answer questions for anyone like that, if they got that, we'd be happy to help out. I remember I saw a question on there a little bit earlier. Someone asked, what are they supposed to do around the animals? So Captain Myers explained that chart that you saw earlier about distances and all that. You got to remember, at the end of the day, these are wild animals. We like to pretend like we know where they're going. We like to pretend like we know what they're going to do. But oftentimes, probably most of the time, we don't know what they're going to do. When you're trying to keep distances on the water, the whales go under the water. You don't know where they are. You give your best guess, and you might find out that you're closer than you probably really need to be. So those rules are there to help, but once again, these are wild animals, and I guess my suggestion to the recreational boater is to use as much caution as possible. Even professional whale watchers and even myself, when we're out there, sometimes they turn and they get right in front of you, and there's not too much you can do about it. So we ask you to be reasonable and to do your best on the rules. And if there's any questions, we're happy to answer those.
Yeah, we did get a few questions in. So the first one from Stephanie, who do we contact to report boats breaking the law?
Well, you contact Department of Fish and Wildlife. You can do that through our hotline that we have listed in our fishing and hunting pamphlets. You can also go to the website, and the website has a reporting link there that you can do online, or you can find the number to contact the Department of Fish and Wildlife Police. You can also contact NOAA if you know their hotline number. They've got one as well that's frequently used by the public and known widely. And then of course, anything that you view that looks as if it's a crime in progress. Crime in progress can be reported to any local jurisdiction. That's San Juan County or Skagit County, or any local jurisdiction if you happen to have their phone number and you want to get a hold of them. And they'll route it to us, but that's a good place to start.
To clarify, should people not call 911 unless somebody's in imminent harm?
Yeah, I would caution against 911 unless you see a threat to life and safety of an individual. You know, we do get 911 calls regarding whale instances, especially whale strikes, where there's been instances of whales being hit by the props of motors. We've gotten 911 calls on that. So, but generally, you know, 911 is for those imminent threats to life and health. So you can certainly get a hold of us in many other ways rather than calling 911.
Okay, thank you. Next question is from Jean, and how often do boaters get cited for not keeping their distances from orcas?
Our primary goal is to educate boaters. Vast majority of the people I contact who are in violation of the rules is usually because they don't even know the whales are there. Almost everyone knows about the whales, but not necessarily what the common practice is on the water or how to go about it, or even if they're there most of the time. So it runs the gamut. Obviously, if I go and I talk to a boater and I educate them on the rules, and then I see them out there the next day or even later that day doing exactly what I told them not to, then at that point, citations are definitely a consideration.
Okay, thanks. Next question from Art. The new regulations are for orcas. Are there similar regulations for grays?
So no, there's not similar regulations. There are regulations that apply to other whale species, transient orcas and other whale species. Those are federal rules, and some of those can vary depending on jurisdiction or parts of the country that you're in. But for the most part, it's 200-yard distance that you need to maintain from other types of whales. But because most people can't tell the difference between a transient orca and a southern resident, we just ask people to just assume that they're a southern resident and keep that distance at 300 and 400 yards so that you don't run afoul of the law. You're safer just to give them the better space.
Great, thanks. Let's see, our next question. I've seen video of whales playing in a boat wake and have heard they like to do this. What should a boater do in this situation? Just keep going?
I would suggest under that situation, if you find yourself making way on the water and you look behind you and there's whales playing in your wake, I would come off plane and put your engine into neutral to avoid that prop strike, and eventually they'll make their way past you. The law specifically addresses instances where the whales are too close, and the law dictates that you disengage your transmission and wait till you're clear, or till they're clear from your boat.
Great, thanks. Oh, some of them are quite long, sorry. Let's see.
And I just wanted to also add another way to send in reports is on the bewhalewise.org website. Especially if you have a photograph, you can upload a photograph and enter a report there of other boaters that you see violating the regulations.
Just a quick note there, you can report on Be Whale Wise, but it's going to be a slower response time than if you contact Department of Fish and Wildlife Police directly. So I just want to make sure that folks are understanding. We're not tied directly to Be Whale Wise.
Right,
So
that just goes to NOAA.
Right.
That just goes to NOAA and not to you guys. Okay, that's good to know.
Do they dispatch you? Would you be someone they dispatch?
No, it doesn't dispatch us. We're
Oh,
dispatched
okay.
by State Patrol primarily, and then we have a in-house dispatch center out of Olympia. It's called WildCom. So those two are the primary, and occasionally local officers will be dispatched by, their local county dispatch as well, if they're plugged into that frequency. So state fish and wildlife officers kind of have information coming at us from a bunch of different avenues.
Okay, so would the WildCom number then be the best for people to call directly?
Yeah, that's a good one, especially if it's during the weekday, during business hours. But if it's not, State Patrol would be the best number to contact.
Okay.
So either one of those numbers, if you can't get a hold of one, the one that's posted on the website and in the pamphlet is to WildCom. But there's also numbers for State Patrol as well. So call those numbers and get us moving. That's the best way to do it.
Put that in the chat.
Okay, well, there's other questions that kind of ask about, like, say, Island County from one of our volunteers, but it seems you covered that. It would fall under the numbers that you were just discussing, correct?
Right. Yeah, we rarely hear from counties, but occasionally a county will hear something or hear one of us on the radio and try to get us directly. Generally, that's just calling an officer on a cell phone from a deputy. But the most surest routes are State Patrol first, or State Patrol and WildCom.
Let's see. I live on the west side of San Juan Island, a few minutes south of Lime Kiln, directly on the water. Boats are always too close or going too fast. Is there something I can do to warn boaters that whales are in the area from my shore? I know Fish and Wildlife are not always out there.
It's, yeah, I wish that I could say we could be out there all the time, every time the whales are there, but it's a big area and there's not a whole lot of us there. I do know that at Lime Kiln, they do put up a flag there when the whales are close to warn people, but as far as from shore, it's going to be very difficult to warn boats. Best thing you can do is probably take some pictures of that boat and try to get a registration number for us. And if we can do that, then we can contact them, let them know what happened. And like I said earlier, a lot of times people just don't know they're there. They're going from point A to point B, and it's a good opportunity for us to educate them and let them know kind of the whole situation that's going on over there.
Thanks. Kind of an appreciation and a question here. Gentlemen, thank you for your time since you've been on the water for such a long time now, and congratulations for that. Have you over the years seen improvement from the commercial whale watching community that you can share?
Go ahead, Taylor.
Okay. Yeah. The commercial whale watch boats are a big help oftentimes to enforcement. They're professionals on the water. They're familiar with what the whales are doing, the certain areas, and they know when they're residents and when they're not. They, especially when the whales are outside really busy areas like Roach Harbor or Friday Harbor, and you got boats coming in and out, having the commercial whale watch boats out there kind of sets up a process. It brings some order to the chaos where you got boats going in and out. And there are many times that without them there, it would become very chaotic. So yes, they are helpful in those situations for sure. And they like everyone else, they want to see the population thrive. It's good for everyone when they do. So I know that they want to do their best as well in making sure that the whales are happy and healthy.
Yeah, and I'll just follow up. In my time that that I've been in command of these units, I have personally seen a shift in behavior and a shift of narrative when it comes to commercial whale watch fleet. You know, I remember starting off and I could tell you some jaw-dropping stories of what I saw behavior occur, not just with recreational boaters, but with commercial whale watch vessels as well. But over time, with regulation, and I think with a shift in the agency starting to understand, or the industry starting to understand that their livelihoods depend on lending a hand toward the preservation of this endangered species. Over time, that shift has created some valuable partnerships and some valuable work done by the industry, the whale watch industry, to get the word out about this incredibly important endangered species, as well as help inform enforcement when resources are needed, which are, as I said earlier, extremely stressed and stretched thin.
Great, thanks. So one more got here. When I have been out boating and I see the whales, I turn off my motor and sit and wait. It's a two-parter here. Is this what you want us to do? Then is it okay to go way out and about, go past the whales, turn off your motor and sit and wait again for them to go past?
So what you are explaining there is called leapfrogging or waiting in the path. And the law specifically directs that you are not allowed to do that. You cannot go forward in front of the whales and turn off your engine and wait for them to come to you. When I'm out there patrolling, if you are outside the perimeter where you should be turning your engine off, I want to see effort of people getting out of the way. I'm not saying come up on plane and dart out of there quickly, because then you'd be violating the 7 knot rule. But if boats are leapfrogging the whales under the hopes of getting real close to them and waiting in the path, I can't tell you how many times I've heard the phrase, well, they came to me. I was here, enjoying the sunshine on the boat, and the whales came to me. Now, are there some instances where that might be the case and that wasn't your intention? Probably, but it's pretty obvious when people are trying to get a closer look to the whales and use that as an excuse to do it. So the law specifically prohibits that, so I would advise to not do that. So yes, you can go out and you can turn your engine off and wait and view them, but as soon as they come within that 400 or getting close to it, I should say before they become within 400 in the path or 300 on the sides, we want to see you getting out of the way and giving them the room they need.
I think that's it from the audience. I did have one question, if either of you can talk just a little bit about, over the years I've had several people in sailboats. They understand that they have to adhere to the same laws, but sometimes they're a bit unsure when they're tacking or, not under motor. Maneuverability. If anyone has any hot tips for anyone that's out on a sailboat.
Yeah, you're right. The rules still apply to a sailboat. They apply to kayaks as well. So in other vehicles like drones and those kind of things. So while we understand that, you're wind powered, you still have an obligation to ensure that you are not encroaching on that safety protection zone around these whales, and that you're taking steps to keep yourself out of the path of them, and even in a sailboat. One of the good things, one of the pieces of advice that we like to give to people and oftentimes are able to, is we'll draw people's attention to the usually the big group of commercial whale watch fleet that's out observing or staged to observe a group of whales. That group generally is very, very good about adhering to the current regulations. And so we oftentimes tell folks in sailboats or other types of vessels, if you stay outside of where they are with that group of commercial whale watchers are, then you're going to be 9 times out of 10 doing the right thing and giving these whales plenty of space. So that's one of the ways that we help give people a visual marker, especially when it's on wide open waters of where they can go.
Yep. Remember the rules are 400 in the path, 300 on the side. That doesn't mean wait till the whales are 300 and then decide to start to move, because if you've waited till then, you're too late. You need to stay outside those numbers. So if you see the whales coming that way, you should start already planning your get out of the way plan.
Great, good to hear. Do you mind saying a little something about drones and a little clarification about that? Because we're always trying to figure it out. You know, if what laws apply to drones over marine mammals, specifically the southern residents. You know.
Well, drones will fall under the same category as other vessel or other implement. Yeah, and so they have to maintain that same spacing and distance. And if a drone is used to harass wildlife of any kind, then there's additional penalties and additional fines that can be levied as well. So they apply to anything in the air just as much as they do on the water.
Great, thanks. I'm so happy to hear that. And to get clarification. And then we have an appreciation. I think that's it for Q&A. One more, yeah. Carol wanted to thank Fish and Wildlife, Alan and Taylor, for all that you do for the southern residents. You have a difficult job and we appreciate it. Thank you. And I think that unless there's any other questions or you two have any other thoughts or staff does, it's a great note to end on, and we do really appreciate both of you being here and your time on the water and your care of the whales and your education approach, because there's always going to be new boaters and new people and new whale advocates and lovers, and the kind of 101 and the basic education will always be ongoing, and we really appreciate all that you do for all these whales and all the animals that we all love deeply.
Well, thank you very much for having us. It's much appreciated.
Great.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to come on.
Yeah. Thank you all for all you do, and thanks all who gave an hour of their time tonight to learn. That makes us feel good that people want to learn and know how to do the right thing, and we appreciate that, and all the work and education that our officers out there do. It's not always easy work. So thank you so much. And thanks to Elisa and Cindy and Amanda, all of our awesome Orca Network pod. And hope you all get to see some whales soon. Hope J-Pod comes back again in the next day or two.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for participating and showing up.
Thank you.
Susan and Howie, you too.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Good night.
Good night.